Hi, do you see my screen now?
Yes, yeah, we got it.
Thank you so much. I'm
Yeah,
so sorry for this.
no problem. We're fine on time. We're actually early, so you're good. All right, it's all yours.
Okay,
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. I first of all thank all the organizers and the chair for giving me this opportunity to present. So my presentation is on boredom, time perception, and algorithmic governmentality. I am Aditya. I am from Jawaharlal Nehru University. So basically, this presentation is about how our contemporary life is organized around entertainment and how this changes the way we interact with our life and its gradual evolution over time, how we have uh, slowly opened up our individuality to getting more influenced by the uh, let's say propaganda or stimulus from outside, and in that way we are now open to being controlled by outside stimulus. So this project, in our everyday life we are terrified by the idea of having nothing to do for a day. Weekends and holidays feel intolerable without a fun activity. We are all scared of boredom. But is this fear accompanying humanity since forever? Or have we acquired it over time? What are the repercussions of boredom and the fear of boredom on our social and political life? These are the few questions that we are going to take up in this inquiry. So this paper is divided into three sections. The first section is understanding boredom in contemporary times. The second section will be on the time perception of boredom and how algorithms interact with it. The third and the final section will be the ways in which boredom and algorithmic interaction has facilitated a creation of a new subject, a new human subject who desires his or her own depression in times of algorithmic governmentality. So this paper attempts to build upon the existing theories and philosophies on boredom and time in order to apply them to the contemporary life surrounded by algorithms. We shall discuss the works of Walter Benjamin, Sigmund Freud, Henry Bergson, and Marcel Proust, and some more thinkers of relevance. Boredom in the contemporary life is so the contemporary life right now is organized around gadgets and systems of entertainment. While it was possible to see such a life as pathological or anomalous before the COVID-19 pandemic, but now it has become the normal state of affairs for every individual. No surprise, the global entertainment industry has seen a continuous growth from $1.39 trillion to almost over $2 trillion now in a span of 10 years. The expanded reach of internet, increase in smartphone users, and the proliferation of OTT platforms, over the top entertainment platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime, is just another symptom of the entertainment demand in our society right now. The underlying phenomena providing a major drive to the entertainment industry is the feeling of boredom and the willingness to avoid it by engaging ourselves in some form of activity. We feel an urge to escape monotony, do something that will satisfy our need for mental stimulus, and then allow us to go back to monotony. However, every time we attempt to distract ourselves, we fail to achieve that feeling of satisfaction and hence the need to move to some other form of entertainment stimulus. But how do we understand this feeling of boredom? Why do we want to avoid this feeling? And has there been any transition in historical time in how we experience and deal with boredom? 20th century philosopher Walter Benjamin was deeply interested in the feeling of boredom. He sees boredom as a historical experience which, according to him, expanded its reach in the 1840s. Thus, he understands boredom as not only something related to modernity, but the way in which we experience modernity. In other words, boredom is not a pathology, but the very condition of modern existence. For Benjamin, modernity unfolded with a removal or replacement of common association. That is, the capacity of being together and communicating our experiences to others, which he calls Erfahrung, is replaced by a life as a series of disconnected impressions, which he calls Erlebnis. Both of these are German words. So he sees man as becoming a hostage to boredom when the potential for sharing his experiences with others is denied to him. In such an existence, the man does not feel like he belongs to the everyday life of the world. Joe Moran, in his essay Benjamin and Boredom, identifies that the sentiment that would more appropriately represent Benjamin's idea is basically the feeling of ennui, where ennui is because Benjamin in his work has been interchangeably using boredom with ennui. Ennui is something more permanent, existential perception. Benjamin identifies it as a culturally significant sentiment. The argument is further developed by Ian Buchanan in his essay The Disappearance of Boredom. With the example of the airport, Buchanan stresses on our inability to wait. He points out that waiting at the airport or a railway station feels torturous. However, it is not torture because of being boring, but because we have been culturally trained in a way that boredom is no longer possible. This partly explains why our contemporary life has become so organized around avoidance of boredom. Buchanan argues that consumer capitalism cannot tolerate boredom. That is why it has transformed the airports into malls, shopping malls, under the logic that waiting does not feel boring if you are shopping. This argument is extended to the smartphone that has transformed the entire world into a shopping mall. They have not just transformed the space, but also transformed time, hence leading to our inability to wait. Buchanan argues that consumer capitalism has killed its most potent critique by conquering boredom. According to him, boredom is our defense against the present. Here, the present means the various kinds of external stimuli that are projected at us through advertisements, social media, or social expectations of behavior. Repetitive behavior and monotony isolates us from these external stimuli and thus defend us from the present. But we indulge ourselves in distractions in order to avoid the repetitive boredom. We make our unconscious mind available for these stimuli. These distractions have presently taken the form of watching videos, social media, and other types of online content. While these external stimuli can be easily identified as commercial advertisements, they do not lose their power to influence our needs merely by being identified with. They still remain powerful because of an underlying phenomenon that Benjamin calls shock. This shock is a central need for the advertisers in order to penetrate into our deeper levels of consciousness and spark a desire to buy. A further discussion of this phenomenon of shock shall take us into the next phase of our discussion. In this section, we shall try to understand the time perception of boredom and how it has been conquered by consumer capitalism in general and contemporary algorithms in particular. Walter Benjamin was interested in tracing the structure of the media form in transition, or the way in which information gets delivered to us. For his time, he analyzed the newspaper. The newspaper had acquired a headline form in a way that the content was delivered as pure information. These disconnected news items, disconnected in the sense that one news item need not have any connection with the next one. So this disconnected news item could not be assimilated or comprehended as experience by readers. This was a shift from the traditional narrative or the story form, which was primarily focused on delivering an experience to the audience. So Benjamin is basically making a distinction between the story form of the information delivery, which was prominent before the arrival of newspaper in our life. In the story form, the primary motive of the speaker was to deliver the experience or the feeling of being in that particular context to the listener. But in the newspaper, we are only concerned with delivering the information and not the experience of it. So Benjamin says that every new media form competes with its predecessor in moving away from the story form. So which means that every newer form of media will move further away from the story form and move closer to just delivering information. This is also true for the form of contemporary social media, where The individual social media posts do not contain complete narratives and stories. The entirety of the narrative may be comprehended over a long-term acquaintance with the context of the social media post. If an individual is given someone else's social media account, it is nearly impossible that they will be able to decipher the meanings of the individual post. Over the past few years, Facebook and now Instagram have both moved to a non-chronological order for social media posts. This allows the algorithms to not only analyze individual preferences but also shape them in a personalized way based on their browsing activity and interest. This lack of comprehensibility and disconnected information pieces because of non-existent narrative leads to something called, which Benjamin called shock. In order to formulate this concept, Benjamin draws heavily from Freud, Bergson, and Proust. He discusses shock in two frames. Firstly, he frames it historically, that is, how the successive media forms undergo transition in moving away from the original story form of narrative. Secondly, he addresses it in relation to the to the unconscious, as theorized by Sigmund Freud. So Benjamin thinks about why every new media form will want a more absurd or a disconnected form of delivery. What is the reason behind this? He says that this is because the advertisers need to produce that lack of comprehension or the lack of experiencing ability in order to generate a moment of shock so that their product becomes memorable. From newspaper to radio, television, online videos, and now social media, each media form disintegrates the sense of assimilation, thus causing deeper shock in every successive form. This moment of shock ejects the audience from the usual receptive state of monotony and penetrates their conscious mind. This allows the advertisement stimulus to generate a desire to buy at a level beyond the conscious mind. The ultimate purpose is to program the unconscious in a way that shopping becomes a fun activity in itself. You do not have to need something in order to buy. You buy something because you need a fun activity to distract yourself from boredom. In Freud's hypothesis, the things that become conscious cannot become a trace of memory. For him, consciousness plays another important function: protection against the external stimuli. He says that protection from stimuli is just as important as reception of stimuli. For this, he argues that excess stimuli can be managed by repeating it and working until it can become an experience and not just a sense perception. This is an important conceptualization for Benjamin in developing his idea of shock. So, shock defense for Benjamin is a form of repetitive training that enables us at the level of the unconscious to internalize the indigestible excess stimulus and make sense of it without having to think about it. Boredom is similar to this repetitive training that isolates us from external stimuli and thus defends us against the present. When we are bored, waiting for some event, time feels to pass differently for us. Ian Buchanan says that time has reasserted itself in a paradoxical way. Or, on the one hand, it has lengthened, it feels longer. The moment seems never to pass, it becomes bloated, expanding without any end. But at the same time, on the other hand, we do not we do nothing to shorten it. Indeed, we refuse to pass the time and thus make time pass. In such a state, we become impenetrable by the multiple stimulus of consumer capitalism. No entertainment feels entertaining enough at this point of time. However, we have been trained over time to stay away from this non-receptive ascetic-like state to the extent that boredom has become impossible for us and entertainment has become compulsive. It is interesting to think of time perception of boredom, where time itself seems to pass differently. This happens in other mental emotional states as well. There is an entire specialized field of study on time perception. However, for the purpose of this paper, we shall limit ourselves to time perception of boredom in relation to the algorithm moderated online media. At this point, it is possible for us to explain the shift from the previous chronological timeline on Facebook and Instagram to the new non-chronological layout of individual posts. The chronological layout was allowing us for an organizing principle that left a sense of assimilation of posts over a short period of time. So under the chronological layout, when you open your Facebook or Instagram account, let's say you opened it twice in a day, in a matter of a few minutes, or if you open it in a matter of few minutes or even in a matter of few hours, it was possible for you to scroll down to an order of the timeline that you had already visited earlier, and hence you would stop scrolling beyond that point. But with the new non-chronological layout of posts, you can no longer visit your own timeline in the same order twice. Even the minimal possibilities of repetition have been eliminated in order to facilitate microshocks at every next visit. This adds to the compulsive checking of new posts and notifications, while you can keep scrolling endlessly on your every visit to the website or application. In other words, the smartphone becomes more capable of capturing our attention and keeps us away from the repetitions of boredom. The point of integration of algorithms with our time perception of boredom is apparent now. The primary purpose of these lines of code is to keep us as far as possible from falling back into monotony of boredom. We need to be kept constantly activated by shock therapy in order to keep us repetitive to the continuous instructions and suggestions of the algorithms that harvest our data about it. The cookies attached to our personal browsing history have made it possible to calculate the type and style of content that can keep us online for the longest possible time. It will also make us come back compulsively. At the same point, it needs to be asserted that we do not avoid boredom because it feels like torture. In fact, a journalist, Terence Blacker, noted in 2004 that if you type the words like torture, rape, or slave into a search engine, you would not be led to some human rights organization or academic report, but to thousands of websites of recreational sadism. These websites exist as top search results because people have preferred them over other results, and hence they have higher algorithmic scores. In other words, the internet audience has turned even torture into a form of entertainment in escaping boredom. The algorithms have hypnotized us into completely receptive state, ready to receive instructions. Frederick Jameson had argued that the final frontier of capitalism was always the consciousness itself. He intends to say that capitalism wants a complete control over the subject to the extent that they only listen to the instructive stimulus produced by capitalism according to its own requirements. In the current form of consumer society, where boredom has become impossible, we have lost our strongest defense against consumer capitalism without even realizing it. The concept is further expanded in the works of Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari in their work Anti-Oedipus, Capitalism and Schizophrenia. They introduce the concept of a desiring machine which produces needs in its subject. They substantiate by saying that every society has several desiring machines. However, the most dominant one in contemporary society is capitalism. The concept is important because it visualizes a project of integration of the biological human body with the desiring machine in a way that the body functions according to the needs and requirements of the machine without even realizing it. We need to ask ourselves if the instructive control of algorithms on us extends only to commercial advertising and compulsive buying of products, or does it extend beyond it into our social and political being? The next section shall attempt to answer these questions. This section discusses algorithmic governmentality. The discussion so far about boredom and shock defense interplay has prepared ground for our discussion on algorithmic governmentality. The processes and sentiments discussed so far shall help us understand how the state power regulates us and our opinions through management of our boredom. Walter Benjamin identifies mass media not as a source of information only or just a distraction, but as a formative force in shaping our subjectivity. This boredom shock interplay has now been assimilated into contemporary political management. Several statements and claims of Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, have been found to be absurd, surprising, and shocking. It has been similar for certain other parts of the world. But while we debate the sense or nonsense and logic of such statements by these important people, we need to realize that the purpose of these statements is not to appeal to the conscious minds of the masses. Rather, it is an attempt to breach and penetrate through the conscious mind and establish themselves as an involuntary memory. far deeper than the reach of our conscious mind. Much like the absurdity that is expected from a good advertisement, political management has entered the territory where the best advertisers shall remain in the media and public memory for the longest time. This reading of contemporary politics helps us understand the disinformation campaigns and fake news phenomenon that has gripped us like a new normal way of conducting politics. But the role of boredom shock interplay goes far deeper into the political vision of the future. Antoine Rob Roy, in her work Algorithmic Governmentality, proposed this concept of algorithmic governmentality. It is an imagination of the world that is based on algorithmic calculations of big data sets rather than politics, law, and social norms. The political issues are sought to be quantified in such a way that the multiple infinite possible uncertainties are reduced into very few probable outcomes. The primary concern is to do away or eliminate the uncertainties and risks by moving from obligation to necessity. Algorithmic governmentality imagines a hyper-individualist society that ends all identifications with classes and groups or communities. Each one must be governed by oneself. At the outset, it appears to be a liberating idea to be governed by our own self. However, the concern of elimination of risk or uncertainties comes with an implicit condition that these risks shall be defined according to the algorithmic calculation. Only the future that has been algorithmically calculated shall be actualized. Every other deviating form or imagination of the future must be suppressed and eliminated. In other words, the reality itself must be subordinated to the vision of the future calculated by the algorithm, a compulsory submission to the decided path. In the future of algorithmic governmentality, the questions about the process and variables involved in calculation of the future do not carry any credibility. What matters is that every individual conforms to one vision of the future. It is at this point that our fear of boredom becomes relevant to the governmentality apparatus. We can be made to desire our own repression by selling us the best vision of the future. It shall be considered the best because it has been calculated. At this point, we need to reflect upon the ways in which we can deal with our fear of boredom. We need to prepare our defense mechanism against the excess stimulus of capitalism that has taken over our collective sense of time. In conclusion, Walter Benjamin uses Marcel Proust's work In Search of Lost Time to argue that boredom helps us in accessing certain memories of our everyday life that remain inaccessible in our conscious state of mind. The shock of modern experience has fractured the possibilities of attaining assimilative memory processes. Hence, the only way of retaining experience is through memoir involontaire or involuntary memory. Siegfried Crocker, in his essay Frankfurt-Zeitung, also recommends developing a particular kind of boredom as a response to the distraction of the commodity in the modern city. He says that it allows us to cultivate more creative ways of expressing ourselves. Perhaps the most helpful reflection comes from Friedrich Nietzsche, his concept of eternal return, which talks about infinite time and finite events that repeat infinitely. It is a time perception much like boredom, where time feels never ending and we have almost nothing to do in that infinite time. Eternal return is an attempt to reconcile the mutually contradictory tendencies of desire, that of repetition and that of eternity, and learning to wait. Learning to wait and the act of allowing ourselves to get bored without looking for distraction contains in itself infinite possibilities of creativity. We must not deprive ourselves of this eternal return. With this, I end my presentation. Thank you very much, and I am open to questions.